We're both fasting, which kind of sucks.
Okay.
But
even though we're going to be drinking water.
Yeah, I can't do it without water.
Last cup of water.
Nice.
But we usually drink a beer and get loose. But we'll just have to recreate that feeling, I guess. Cool.
Nice.
All right, let's do it. Elevation Nation, tonight on the podcast, we have on a special guest, as Parker always says, someone, you might have heard the song, No New Friends. Well, I think it's actually the opposite for our guest tonight. He wants all the new friends, and we're going to talk to this amazing guest tonight about connections and connecting with people all around the world and his incredible story. Rob Lawless, welcome to the Elevation Nation podcast, brother. We're excited to have you aboard.
Yeah, what's up, Sam? Parker, nice to see both of you guys again. Feels like a mini reunion, so happy to be here. Each of us have met individually, but now we are all together.
I was going to say, we definitely haven't all met each other together and have had a conversation. Elevation Nation, if you don't remember, Sam and I both spoke with Rob individually for an hour, and he got to know us. But tonight, you're going to get to know more about Rob and himself and how he elevates himself in the real world. So, Rob, it wouldn't be the Elevation Nation podcast if we didn't ask you to kick off with an elevator pitch. Who are you? Where are you from? What you up to today?
Nice. So I'm Rob Lawless. I come from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm the youngest of 3 siblings in my family. So I'm 30. I have a brother who's 32, a sister who's 36. All 3 of us went to Penn State University. I graduated in 2013 with a degree in finance, minored in accounting and entrepreneurship when I was there, and was also really involved in clubs. I did fraternity. I was part of the Penn State Dance Marathon, which raises money for the fight against pediatric cancer. I was part of Habitat for Humanity. I built houses over spring breaks. I was a tour guide for prospective students, and I was part of our homecoming efforts. So really involved when I was at school. And after I graduated, I took a job as a business analyst at Deloitte Consulting. Did that for a year and 3 months. Very quickly realized that, well, you guys work for EY. Wait, are you both with EY? I can't remember.
We are. Yeah, I was going to say.
Okay, so,
right? We know the world well. It's okay, Rob. You can be honest here.
Yeah, so you know. But I was at Deloitte Consulting and very quickly realized it wasn't for me, kind of the never knowing when my day was going to end. And yeah, it was a lot. And the entrepreneurial side of me was always convinced that I was going to do my own thing. And I eventually left Deloitte after a year and 3 months. I went to a venture funded tech startup in Philly. They had 24 million in funding. I was like the 80th employee in that company. And while I was there, I started this project, which is Rob's 10K Friends. It's my mission to spend 1 hour one-on-one with 10,000 different people to learn about their lives and see what comes of opening doors for no particular reason. I started this when I was at this tech startup. I had left Deloitte to go to this tech startup, and while there, I started this in November 2015. 8 months later, that startup was bought out. I was laid off. So in July of 2016, I hopped into this project full time. And since then, and we can get into the story, but since then, since the beginning of the project, I have met over 4,500 people, 3,259 of them in person. COVID happens, I go virtual. So basically everyone has been virtual since then, aside from a handful of people, and now starting to get back into in-person. But that's the gist of who I am. Maybe that's a minute to 2 minute pitch of who Rob is.
No, that was perfect.
6 years, just cranking up those numbers, meeting new people. Like, that's incredible. We're going to get into a ton of this. And obviously your transition from college to the real world, like you said, where you were doing so much at Penn State and then you jumped into Deloitte and you just figured out that it wasn't for you. But we'll get into that. But the way we're going to break down this conversation, Rob, is around this concept that Sam and I have been pretty much obsessed with over the last year and a half, I feel like. And it's called mental fortitude. And at the end of the day, Sam and I both believe that mental fortitude is the key ingredient that young adults need to push outside their comfort zone and truly elevate themselves when it comes to the real world. And the way we break down mental fortitude is into 3 parts. It's knowing who you are, having self-awareness, having a vision, and holding yourself accountable. So our questions today are going to be around self-awareness, vision, and accountability. So is that cool? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that those are 3 really important things. So I'm happy that they are the 3 parts of the equation of mental fortitude. I agree with that.
And I'm really excited to get into this conversation with Rob. I think one thing that I always find inspiring about all the different people that you're meeting is you bring the same passion and energy and curiosity to every single time that you meet someone new, and you're meeting multiple people a day. I sometimes complain to Parker. I'm like, dude, we have another podcast once a week. I have to like prep questions and make sure I'm excited and have energy after a long day. Like, you're incredible, man. So if people haven't checked out what you're doing with your project and Rob 10K Friends, we're going to link to it all. We're going to talk about it throughout this conversation, but I just want to give you kudos, man, because you remember Parker and myself, and you've met probably another 500 people in between that. So you have a photographic memory, or you're taking really good notes, but kudos to you. So let's get into it, Rob. Our first bucket here of mental fortitude is self-awareness. So we want to boil it down. This is going to be tough. We haven't prepped you on any of these, but what is one word that best describes you?
Curious. I think curious is a really good word, and funny that you just mentioned it in that little passage there, but yeah, curious is a word that best describes me. As a kid, very curious. It's funny, I have a nephew now who's 13 months old, and he's opening every drawer and every cabinet and pulling everything out, and he's feeling like the surfaces of all different things. And he's very curious, and I'm like, oh, he's going to get in trouble at school because he's just going to want to see what happens when you do this or when you do this. I got in trouble when I was in preschool because they had these little bear and lion kind of action figurines or whatever, and I noticed that if you rubbed it on the wall, it made a mark. I never rubbed crowns or markers on the wall, but in preschool, I had these bears, and I was drawing on the wall with them, and I convinced my best friend Eric to do it with me, and we just had a field day on this wall. And at the end of the day, my parents get a call, and they had to pay for the whole wall to be repainted.
Oh my gosh!
And I remember them coming to me and saying, Rob, you have to give us the money from your piggy bank because you did this and you have to pay for this wall. And I remember hiding some of it. I was like, oh no, I'm not going to pay for this wall. This is my entrepreneurial self trying to conserve my resources.
Exactly. He's being smart with his finances from a very early age.
Right. But maybe I didn't have the accountability piece back then, but I got it over the years. But yeah, curious. And I think, as you said, with each conversation, I'm really curious about what people's paths are. And as a whole, I'm really curious to see what happens when you meet 10,000 people. That's the fun part of this for me, is I don't know what is going to happen with this project. I never know what the next 3 months of my life are going to look like. To an extent, it can be difficult at times, but also I think it makes life really exciting. And that curiosity is a big part of what drives me to be passionate every day.
You talk about that story when you were younger, and you're looking back on that now, as you say that the one word that defines you is curiosity. You're curious. And that moment, way, way back, you were curious because you just wanted to see what would happen with some crayons and whatnot. But was there like a specific life event growing up, maybe it was recent, that was like very impactful for you to figure out that you are very curious and that is a value in your life, and that drives a lot of your entrepreneurial spirit, who you are as a person?
I don't know if I have a specific life event. The second word that I was thinking of in my mind, which I think comes right after curious, is adventurous. And I feel like I have childhood memories of going on adventures in the backyard at my house, or adventures in my basement and, pretending to be Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader with my friends. And we have woods across the street from my house. So my brother and his friends used to play Lord of the Rings, and we would go into the woods, and that type of adventure, I really enjoyed that as a kid. And it feels like as you get older as an adult, you sort of lose that, and you have to take on this sense of seriousness, and life becomes a lot more, for lack of a better word, I'll say dull, because I guess that's the way that I was seeing it. I didn't feel like I had that childhood sense of adventure anymore. And specifically at Deloitte, you know, working 2 years as an analyst, one as a consultant, getting my MBA, coming back as a senior consultant, manager, senior manager, the path seemed so laid out, and it didn't seem like there was any room for fun within it. Of course, people take the approach of taking that money to do fun things, but for me, I think I just needed to structure my whole life as an adventure. So it was really just that sense of having those kind of memories as a kid. And then I think entrepreneur-wise, I remember when my sister was at Penn State, there was her boyfriend at the time was in a fraternity, and I must have been in 7th or 8th grade. It was a year that Penn State played Michigan. Penn State essentially won the game. There was a last play. The refs called a penalty. They added a second to the clock. On that play, Michigan scored a touchdown and won the game. And when we walked into the fraternity house, there was a shirt on the wall that said Michigan cheats. And I remember being like, what is that for? And the guy said, oh, it's one of my fraternity brothers. He's in this entrepreneurship class, so he's made these shirts to sell them. And it just struck me that someone could create a product of their own and just put it out there and sell it, and a product that people connected with. I connected with from that experience. And I remember that inspiring me entrepreneurship-wise. And then I worked for a financial advisor in high school, small, like 10-person company, and he did really well for himself. And I think seeing success in a small scale like that really inspired me as well, because he didn't have this massive company attached to him. It was just him, and the fact that he was in the office at 6 a.m. every day, and the fact that he was there every Saturday and oftentimes Sundays as well. And I saw that correlation between the individual effort and the individual success. And I think that shaped me as well.
Those are some very good stories of, you know, vivid pictures in your mind of this is when entrepreneurship kind of struck me. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, they have that story, that one moment when they realize, or it all clicked for them. And I think it's silly, but I think Shark Tank has helped a lot of people realize how entrepreneurship can be played out in different ways. I think before Shark Tank, before social media, an entrepreneur seemed kind of like a crazy thing to do. In our parents' era, you know, the biggest entrepreneurship thing that you could probably do was, I don't know, opening a restaurant or a store. They weren't too far-fetched of ideas. But now, to your point, entrepreneurship can be as simple as selling a perfectly timed "We are Penn State, we hate Michigan" shirt, right? And making some money off of that. And I think that's a perfect example. I want to ask you, Rob, a question, right? Young Rob, he was curious, rubbing those lion figurines on the wall and emptying his piggy bank, right? You were curious from such a young age, and you go into a great Big Ten school like Penn State, and you major in finance, and you get a job at the Big Four. Great firm. Jobs that many people will probably work their whole lives trying to get. And it's, you know, that's the path that I think for a lot of people they see is laid out for them. How were you self-aware and introspective enough to take a step back to make a change in your life and hop to the next, you know, more fintech-like startup in Philly?
And I know you brought up that you didn't see yourself having that so defined route because you wanted kind of the unknowing. Well, your curiosity drove a lot of that feeling. But like, what about the moment where you like were thinking about leaving? Like, how do you, the way, I mean, like, I talk to friends who we work with at EY. It's just like when they leave, it's like, damn, like we got everything in front of us. This is where you want to be, right? What was like that time like?
I think if you talked to me when I was a senior at Penn State, I'd be very excited for my time at Deloitte. And I still think it was a great company. I have this, like, it didn't fit my personality as much, but I'm happy I have it on my resume. And I think it taught me a lot in that time. But I think it was just going through the experience. My mom reassured me so many times after I left that you were so excited for this. This was your dream job. But yeah, I had to go and experience what life was like there to realize that no, it wasn't my dream job. Because for me, as I'm sure for you guys too, and other people who work in the Big Four environment or in consulting, I had built up this idea of glamour in my mind, the traveling to different cities, the working with really cool businesses and corporations, the expense budget, the building up the hotel points.
It's a big selling point.
It is. And then you realize that you're spending 4 months in a government building in Frankfort, Kentucky, working on state benefits and in fold out tables and chairs. And you're like, wait, where's the glamour? And actually, I look back fondly on those times because I had a really good team of people. And Kentucky was a very chill state. I used to drive past farms of retired racehorses, and that was a great way to end a consulting day. But I just realized it was a lack of control for me, and also a feeling that I felt like I was a golf cart that could go 100 miles an hour, but I had a governor on me, so I could only go 40 miles an hour type thing. And I think one of the ways I recognized that was growing up in the age of Facebook and Snapchat. I think Evan Spiegel is the same age as me, so I was seeing people my age who looked just like me create these companies that were worth billions of dollars. And I guess I've always had either a naivety or a confidence or a cockiness, whatever you want to call it, that I could do that too. I recognized that it was going to take a ton of upfront work and a lot of effort, but I just felt like if someone else could do it, then why couldn't I, or why couldn't I at least take that chance to try? So when I was at Deloitte, I was in the very traditional kind of check the boxes path. I had a girlfriend that my family liked. I had the consulting job. I was excited at the opportunity to get my MBA. And I never actually sought to proactively leave Deloitte, but my mindset was, if an opportunity comes up, I'm not going to pass it up. I'm going to make sure I hop on it. So on that project in Kentucky, I was the business analyst, the senior consultant. I would fly in from Philly. He would fly in from Houston. And during one of our late nights at work, we were talking about my interest in entrepreneurship, and he said, oh, you should connect with my friend Ben. He went from a private equity firm to a tech startup actually in Philly, and now he's their director of sales. So he put me in touch with his high school friend. I talked to him on the phone. I looked up their company. They looked cool. They were doing data analytics, which at the time, Tableau was like this new thing that all the partners at Deloitte were talking about. So I felt really confident about the future of data analytics. And I talked to Ben and I said, hey, listen, I'm not interested in joining your company or anything like that. I just am curious about your path of going from private equity to the startup. And then that conversation turned into us grabbing drinks, him inviting me to join their team, me joining RJ Metrics, the startup. So it was kind of a gradual thing. And I think one of the things I've noticed about myself and thinking about self-awareness is I have this ability to make big life choices with minimal kind of investment wise. Like I compare it to going to Chipotle and choosing between the bowl and the burrito. I'm like, oh, well, I'll do this one. And I think part of the reason I have that attitude is because I trust myself. Like if I had stayed at Deloitte, I would have trusted myself to succeed in that environment. And if I had taken that leap, I would have trusted myself to succeed in taking that leap. And I kind of feel like that's why I've been able to stay so committed up to this point.
It's almost like having the mindset that, I mean, that's mental fortitude right there. Like in a nutshell, it's like having this mindset of putting yourself in a position where you don't really know the outcome, but you know that it's going to maybe end up all right. And if it doesn't end up right, you'll fall back somewhere, and then your new route will be all right. And then if you're along that way and you deviate away, it'll be all right. Like that's what mental fortitude is all about. I mean, even the conversation that you had with that person at the tech startup, you didn't even have the mindset that you wanted a job. You just put yourself outside of the comfort zone, had a conversation, which led to one thing. Next thing you know, you're moving on from Deloitte to this job. And then, I mean, when you're at the tech startup, Rob's 10,000 friends comes up. And like, it's just like, okay, what's going on? And then it's just next thing you know, it's super cool. And it's really, really awesome to hear how you portray it in your life. But Rob, we got one more question on self-awareness. You've talked with how many people? What would you say, 4,600 people with
I think I'm at 4,552 or something like that at this point.
Wow. It's a lot of people, and I'm sure you've learned a lot about yourself, but is there one thing in particular from all the people that you've talked with that has like resonated in helping you learn a little bit more about who you are?
Yes, I think the thing that I always say, which I know will resonate with both of you, is no one really knows what they're doing with their lives. Everyone's just doing the best they can with the resources that they have. And it took talking to people who were older than me, or people who were making more money than me, or who were seemingly more successful than me, who also admitted they had no idea that what they were doing, for me to realize, okay, we're all kind of in this space together, and we're all just looking at the resources that we have. And for me in my life, it's some of those resources include growing up in a family where education was encouraged and having the ability to focus on strictly my education when I was at school. Like, I didn't have to grow up in a family where I had to drop out of school to get a job to help my parents pay rent. I've met people who've had to do that. My parents were able to take care of themselves and give me the opportunity for me to focus on myself. And I met friends at Penn State who opened up their house in LA for me to stay there for a year and a half. I had a friend who let me crash with him and his wife in Hoboken for 9 months. So those were part of my resources as well. And when I was looking at the formula of, okay, how do I get this project done, or how do I complete this? Those were the things I looked at. But at the end of the day, I was still learning at the rate of experience, right? Now, we could talk about it later. Sam and I were talking at the beginning of this about how the last time we spoke, I didn't have a voice. I had laryngitis. And that was back in May. So I sound different today to Sam than I did back then. And that week, because I couldn't talk, I couldn't have these conversations with people for my project, I was only meeting like one person a day. Typically, I'd meet 4 people a day. And I put out an Instagram story and said, hey, I'm trying to get into public speaking. Can anyone hook me up with their school or help me land gigs? Because I was like, I have to fill this time somehow. I can't just be sitting in this apartment all day. And that laryngitis / putting out that Instagram story led me down this path of speaking, which now I've had 7 gigs already that I've completed. I have several more on the calendar and more in the works. And that has kind of become the way that I'm planning to support myself financially going forward, because I see a lot of promise in that area. But before May, it was just a consideration. And I didn't know what I was doing. It just took random events and me kind of looking at the resources, which was, I have this audience on Instagram. I have this idea that I could potentially speak. What can I make of it? And then it turns into this. So yeah, it's, that's what I've learned, is no one knows what they're doing. Everyone's doing their best.
And if you're curious, it helps even better, right?
Yeah. If you keep an open eye to the things around you and I think an optimism about what you're doing, you tend to see a lot of opportunities.
That leads perfectly into our next section, Rob. And Elevation Nation, as you guys know, we don't practice this. So that was a great transition, Rob. Thank you.
You're welcome.
To vision here, because I think we're going to get a really interesting answer out of you around vision, because I think you know what brings you happiness and fulfillment. But to your point of using the resources, taking advantage of time and opportunities, you are very good at going with the flow and just adapting and adjusting on the fly, which is a huge part of mental fortitude. But on the opposite side of that, it's strategizing ahead, figuring out what you want so that you can go out and hold yourself accountable to get there. So I'm really excited to dive into this piece, because to be completely honest with you, when you were saying, oh, like a big life decision is the same as a Chipotle burrito, like I can't even pick if I want a bowl or a burrito myself. So like life decisions are sometimes really hard for me. So
I just go with what goes through my head, man. It's just like, boom, that's it. I'll add the soft tacos on the side. I'll ask for the burrito.
And both you guys are better than I am. I take like 10 minutes to pick. So I'm excited to get into vision. When you first kind of came up with Rob's 10K Friends and this concept that you wanted to pursue further, what did you actually envision for it? Did you envision anything? Did you just envision casually meeting people? Did you envision doing it full time and then speaking gigs out of it? How much of this did you kind of plan out in your head, and how much has been go with the flow?
I would say, with the benefit of hindsight, I probably thought of about 10%, if that, of what the project actually is, and probably learned the other 90% along the way. But the very first version of the project, I was thinking that I would meet 10,000 people in 1 year for 10 minutes at a time. And I still have the iPhone note. It's from January of 2014. That was kind of the origin of me thinking about it. And it's funny because I told my girlfriend at the time about this idea, and she was like, hey, there's this guy in New York that does this thing about people, and he takes photographs of them. You should look him up. And I have an email of me emailing Humans of New York, being like, hey, I have this project, and my girlfriend just told me about your project. So cool. We should link up sometime. Hopefully we'll cross paths someday in the future, because I love what he's doing. But I plan to do 10 minutes at a time, and I just thought it would be a really cool concept for one person to meet 10,000 different people. And I didn't think through any of the details of what that 1 year would look like, which was a mistake. There was no planning for the bathroom. There was no planning for lunch or how I was going to get from one person to the next. I just imagined myself like walking into a Wawa, talking to someone for 10 minutes, going on to the next person, talking to them, being at like the mall, talking to someone, and on to the next person, and just introducing myself to people and sharing with them what I was doing. And I always say I think that was a bad idea, so it sat in my iPhone notes for like a year and a half. And in that time I left Deloitte, I went to the tech startup. I had written a couple journal entries, and in one of them I had written my ability to meet people is what will take me to where I want to be. And I didn't know what I meant at the time, but the next time I went back and read that, it re-inspired me to think of that idea again. And at this time, I'm doing 30-minute sales calls for the tech startup, and I realized that could be surface level. So I wanted to double it and really have time to dive beneath the surface with people. So that's where the 1 hour with each person came from. And then it kind of flipped on its head from this short-term 1 year project to this very long-term. And even back then, if you look at my initial emails, I tell people, I think I'm going to aggressively complete this in about 4 years. We're almost 6 years in, and I'm less than halfway done. So I clearly was off the mark there. But yeah, that I think was, I'm forgetting the original question here, but
no, I think you answered it perfectly.
The vision.
It's what what did you vision for it?
So yeah, that was the vision. And then I thought that I would do with people something that made them interesting. Like if you were a photographer, that we would spend an hour going around taking pictures. And then it just kind of, it became so easy to connect with people over coffee or over beers, and without distractions of activities, it was so easy to get to know someone's story and explain mine to them that I just kind of fell into that cadence. But it still has the possibility to evolve. I never wanted to do video calls. Now the last 1,300 people have been that way. I always did want to get abroad and meet people from different countries and different cities. And I now want to do more video content in the future, because at the beginning it was just, I take a picture with people, I write their story, and I didn't care whether or not the story was interesting. I just thought the whole overall concept was interesting. And now I see the value of showing the value of human connection. It's great to have a picture with people, but if you can really bring someone into the experience through video, I think Yes Theory is a perfect example of a group of guys who do that really well. That is something that I would like to do in the future, almost like an Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown, minus the food, plus activities, just people connecting and sharing stories.
That's so cool. So I got two questions for you. Who was the first quote-unquote friend, and do they have a special place in your heart?
The first friend was Jim Brady, and at the time he was the CEO of this online website called BillyPen.com. Basically just a news source for millennials in Philadelphia. And the reason he was the first person is because they would put out who's next lists. So who's next in the culinary scene of Philadelphia, who's next in the music scene, who's next in the political scene. And when I was first starting this project, I thought, okay, well, there's the people I'm going to reach out to, because it's already diversified from a bunch of different industries. And I was used to, from sales, finding people's emails, sending them unsolicited notes for things, and just being like, hey, can I borrow your time? And I messaged him as well and just said, hey, I'm planning to reach out to a lot of these people. I see you're the CEO of this company. If you want to be part of the project as well, let me know. And we met up in Center City, Philadelphia for lunch one day. He thought that I was already 1,000 to 2,000 people into the project. And I laughed and told him he was the first person. But
oh my gosh. He's like, what?
We had a good chat. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to talk to the people who were in the first 10 and understand why they took the meeting with me, because I didn't even have an Instagram at that point. Just an email, a brief introduction of myself. And now, you know, when someone reaches out to me, they can see, oh, this guy's established. He's had press. He has followers on Instagram, whatever. I can be part of it. I can share my story to an audience. Back then, there was none of that. It was just people who were willing to connect.
And to my second question, how are you going around, I guess before the pandemic, like, and meeting people in person all over? Like, are you literally getting on a plane and meeting one person, or are you saying, I'm going to meet, in this week, I'm going to be in Wisconsin, and I'm going to meet as many people in Wisconsin as possible for this week, and then the next week I'm going to drive to Michigan, or whatever it is? Is that how it goes usually?
Oh, it was much less spontaneous than that, much more stable, I would say, because from November 2015 until May of 2017, strictly in Philadelphia. I was meeting people in Philly. That's where most people knew about my project, and I would ride my bike. And at that time, I was meeting 5 people a day. I was riding my bike like 5 miles a day, meeting people from one part of the city to the other. And then when my lease was up, I knew I couldn't afford to rent and continue doing this full time. So I moved stuff back to my parents, and my Penn State roommate invited me to stay with him. So I drove across the country in my older brother's car because he had moved to New York City, and spent the summer in Los Angeles, all living in an extra bedroom of my friend's apartment. So I had a home base there, and then I would meet people, you know, in different parts of LA. Then I came back to Philly for 5 months, back to my parents' house, and I would meet people in Philly. And then I went back to LA for 9 months, but to that same room in that same apartment. And then back to Philly, then back to LA, same room, same apartment.
And along the way, you would meet people.
Rob, it sounds like you need an RV, bro. That's what I'm getting at.
I was going to say,
you just need an RV.
A big RV, Rob's 10K friends. You're just traveling around and meeting people. Like, that would be so
if anybody
cool.
from like Winnebago or any of the other RV manufacturers is listening, Rob would love to be sponsored by you guys, and will happily plug Winnebago for a free ginormous RV. So let's make that happen.
Yes. Shoot me a message on Instagram. We'll make it happen.
Exactly.
God, that would be so freaking cool.
That would be sweet. That reminds me of, I don't know if you guys ever watched this on MTV. It was like of the Bucket List show. Gosh, what's it called?
Buried Life.
No, I've
The
never
Buried
seen
Life.
that.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
Huh.
Those guys, when I was like in high school, watching those guys just travel around the country and cross things off their bucket list, it's like, this is the way to live life.
That's a great idea.
Oh,
and they would just film it
yeah.
and all that?
How have you never seen this? Oh, man, you'd love it, Parker.
I would say those guys were probably one of the biggest inspirations of my life. I loved that show. And I deem them to be, if you are familiar with Yes Theory and their YouTube channel, The Buried Life is like the OG Yes Theory before YouTube existed.
Huh.
It's a great
Got
show.
some research to do, I guess.
Exactly. You'll love it. But
Rob,
Rob,
buried on NTV.
it's a throwback. I don't even know if you can. Maybe you'll find it on YouTube somewhere. Buried, pun intended. So, Rob, I think one thing I just want to quickly highlight and bring it back full circle to the original question, which was just talking about vision. I think you really have 2 parts of vision that you make work for you. You had your original, I almost want to call it an affirmation, right? When you wrote down in your phone and you saw it again that you said, I'm good when I meet people or talk to people and hear their stories, right? You didn't know how that was going to come to life, but you had that written down. And why I love that you said that is because that's rooted in what we just talked about, self-awareness, right? You were self-aware enough and knew who you were as a person to figure out, this is what I'm good at. This is what brings me fulfillment. This is what brings me joy and purpose. And I think because you took time to establish that, you then were able to develop a vision of somehow having that be part of your life. And why that resonates a lot with me and why I'm so passionate about that is at Elevation Nation, we preach knowing who you are is so important. And I think that's hard for a lot of people. But once you get there, you have the vision, right? And I think that's even harder for some people, myself included, right? I might preach mental fortitude, but it's hard for me to figure out what I want to do in the next 10 years, 20 years. I have no idea. But what I do know is what brings me joy and fulfillment. So trying to find activities and painting a vision for my future life around those activities is kind of what I'm striving for. So I kind of love that you did that exact same path. It brings me a little bit of hope that maybe someday I'll find my shtick and what, will really be my passion project. So I love that.
What do you mean? This is the shtick.
No,
Sam?
Parker. This is the podcast
This is
that
the
starts
shtick, man.
the shtick.
Come on. Oh, exactly. Exactly.
This is the spark,
Sam, you're gonna.
bro.
Wait, I'll get up. I'll literally put the mic on the ground right now. I'll get up. I'll leave this
This
room.
is not the end goal. This is the start. Exactly.
I will drive to Rob's house and we'll finish this podcast without you, Sam. Yeah, Rob, I got one more question in vision. You're so busy meeting people all the time. How are you able to prioritize the things in your personal life that are meaningful to you?
I think the way I do it is because I do this full time, I'm on a very 9 to 5 schedule. I meet people I was meeting 4 people a day at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m., and 3 p.m. And for each person I meet, there's about an hour of writing, posting, getting a little video clip. So say the last meeting ends at 4, post is posted by 5. So 8 to 5. What's everyone else doing in that time? They're at work. So to me, it's funny because it's almost like asking someone who goes to work, how do you have time for a social life or friends or family?
That's true.
It's just outside of work. And for me, it's the same structure. And I do have a little bit more flexibility of like podcasts and things like that. And I do a lot of my messaging and scheduling on the weekends and stuff, but I do it because it's interesting to me. Like, I don't mind working on the project on a Friday night. I think I'm past the point in my life where I'm going out to the bars or anything like that. Sometimes with my friends still, but a lot of my friends are married now and they're working on kids. So I'm just past that point where they're with their families and I'm with my project, and it makes us happy. And I think that's kind of how I structure it. It's just my life overall is very spontaneous, but my life day to day is very routine. And I think that is a big piece of my, I guess, success so far.
I want to ask you one more question on what you just said. Get a little vulnerable here. Is there stuff that you say you're 30 now? Is there stuff that you feel like you're missing out on because you're focusing so much on your business?
I don't think I'm missing out on anything. I do feel the pressure sometimes of, like, for example, with the pandemic happening, I was just, okay, I'm going to get back into dating in 2020. I'm going to finally get back out there, because for the longest time, I would put both my time and my money into the project. And I would always say I wouldn't take myself out on a date, so I'm not going to go out with a girl and try to get into dating, right? It's just not a priority for me. But yeah, I think that was something that I feel more at 30 than I did at 24 or 25 or 26 in the early stages of the project, because you start to see the ways that your life forks from your friends. And most of my friends are in that 9 to 5. They all bought houses around the same time. They all got married around the same time, got dogs around the same time, now are having kids. And the cool thing is that's the right path for them. And they're very respectful and supportive of my path. And I love that they're on that path, because if they were on mine, they would hate it. If I was in theirs right now, I would hate it. Like, if I was 30 and I was married with a kid in the 9 to 5 and I couldn't see an escape from that 9 to 5 as to how I would get back in control of my own life, I think that would make me very uneasy. So for me, the bigger priority is having this project and the control of my future set in place. And once I have that, then it's okay, we'll build the dating in, we'll build the house in, we'll build the car in. And now doing the speaking things, I'm starting to think back with my financial brain of, okay, investments, how do I put myself in a structured investment strategy to make sure I'm good to go for the future? But all of that kind of had to go out the window in order for me to be able to creatively work on the project first.
Sam, it's like Rob, your buckets and what you prioritize, Sam and I talk about this all the time, prioritizing the buckets in your life. Your buckets look a little bit different than the people you associate yourself with, your friends, and the people that, like, a stereotypical 30-year-old doesn't have the buckets that you're prioritizing. And it's so interesting. We ask that question to everyone, and hearing your answer and the unique situation you're in, and just how you describe that it's okay that I'm not in that position because it's not right for me at this time.
And what does that go back to, Parker? Self-awareness.
Self-awareness.
Of course. It's perfect,
Yeah.
You teed that up perfectly. You have to know who you are and what brings you fulfillment. And I think one of the reasons I love Elevation Nation and what we're doing is because I've seen so many young people struggle with the expectations bestowed upon them by society, by their parents, by the school they went to, by the community they grew up in, and thinking that they were locked in to a certain path, even though that path did not resonate with them. And if we can help one person take a step back, become introspective, take some time to get to know who they are, who the person is in the mirror, and change their path for the better, like, that makes all of this worthwhile, because I don't think enough young people do take the time to figure out who they truly are. I think it's a lot easier to just go with the flow and say, I don't know, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Quote, I'm doing air quotes. Nobody can see this. That was air quotes.
It takes mental fortitude to have mental fortitude, Sam. That's what you just said.
Yeah, I guess that didn't make sense then. All right, my
very
bad.
Meta.
Yeah, very meta.
Oh, Jesus.
All right, so Rob, that brings us to our last section of mental fortitude, which is accountability. And I was thinking about this when we were, going over your story. You meet with a heck of a lot of people, and I and Parker as well, we're in a business professional community, and people sometimes don't show up for our meetings, and they're getting paid. You have all these amazing random people around the world on different time zones coming to meet with you and be your friend. How do you try to hold them accountable so that you're not filling up slots and people are blowing you off? I was always curious about that.
I guess the best answer is I control the controllables, because honestly, people do blow me off and people do cancel last minute and not show up. And it can be frustrating when that happens, but I can't feel any sense of guilt or shame about that because I couldn't control it. Sometimes if I have the time, I'll try to fill that slot later in the day. But if it's an 8 a.m. meeting and at 7:50 they can't make it, they tell me that, there's nothing I can do about that. So I think one of the things I've learned throughout my project is to control the controllables and also my emotions around those types of things. But what that looks like for me, and a lot of this comes from my sales experience, is every single person that I meet, I send them a calendar invite to hold the time. I send them an article telling them how I'm not interviewing them. It's just literally us having a conversation, getting to know each other. And then the night before, I always send them a message, hey, just confirming we're still on for tomorrow. Also, do you mind if I record our conversation so I can grab a clip for my page? So I'm just in that rhythm with people. And when I get those messages the night before, yeah, we're still on for tomorrow, looking forward to it, then I know, okay, I'll see that person tomorrow. Sometimes, because it's on Instagram, I'll see that it's seen and I don't get a response. And then I can say, oh, okay, I honestly don't know if this person's going to show or not. And I guess the beautiful thing about my project is there's always something to do. Like if I have an hour of free time, that's an hour I can use to reach out to corporations or universities and try to pitch myself to speak there. Or I can do contract work that I have with current engagements, things like that. Or I can go through messages to set up times for the next week. So there's always something to do and a way to spend that time. But the way that I hold people accountable is just by making sure I'm on top of them and reminding them that, hey, we agreed to meet at this time. Will I see you there?
How are you? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people like Rich Keller connected Sam and I to you. A lot of people probably referring other people to you. How are you filling those slots that, if you're trying to hit 4 people every day, like how are you filling those spots if they're not a referral? Are people reaching out? Are you just literally going up to random people. You're joining community groups, both in person and
Parker,
online.
Rob's famous, bro. He's got people reaching out to him left and right. What are you talking
These
about?
are not problems I have to worry about.
Okay, that's great.
No, in the beginning, I was doing a lot of outreach of just, again, messaging people I thought were interesting from the Philadelphia community. And it did start to grow word of mouth. And it kind of hit this point, around 65 people, someone wrote an article on me. And then I had a bunch of people saw that article and reached out to me on Instagram. And I think just over time, I've had these little boosts, I guess you could say. For example, I met Matt from Yes Theory back in May of 2018 for the project. A month later, I was meeting one of their video interns, and Amar just filmed a little clip of it, and he posted it to the Yes Theory Instagram story and said, hey, this guy's meeting 10,000 people. And he included my handle. And overnight, I had like 400 messages from people all around the world, which I think is more, it's a testament to Yes Theory.
All right, I take my question back.
Yeah, loyal audiences of anyone that I've met, but other things, I did the Kelly Clarkson Show. I had a lot of people from that. Now This posted a story about me to their Instagram, which had 2 million followers at the time. A lot of people messaged me from that. And most recently, TikTok, I put out a couple videos there just explaining what I was doing and said, hey, if you want to meet, shoot me a message on Instagram. And from each of those videos, I had about 1,000 people message me, if not more. So now at this point, and referrals are a funny thing because I try, like, people will be like, oh, should I introduce you to people? And I think, yes, but maybe in some time, because I want to get to other people who've reached out as well. And I've always been kind of a first come, first serve mindset when it came to scheduling meetings.
Yeah.
Then when I started getting reached out to so many people from other countries in the world, the diversification of the project became really important to me. It was always really important. I just didn't have the ability to do so as much. But then when I had all these messages from South America and messages from like Finland and Denmark and Latvia and Estonia and then India and Pakistan and like all these different places and like Kenya and Nigeria, then I was like, okay, well, I haven't met someone from this country yet, so I'm going to meet with them, or I haven't met with this person, so I'm going to meet with them. And every once in a while, I'm curious about someone's story, so I'll meet with them. But yeah, at this point, I just have a really nice bank of people who are willing to meet, and I'm meeting people so often that that word of mouth kind of consistently spreads it. So I think sustainability-wise, I have enough people to always keep that engine running, and that's a really nice feeling.
That's so cool.
Rob, I gotta bring this back though to, you said at RJ Metrics, Tableau was the big thing. For anyone that still knows how to use Tableau, I know there's people out there, I'm not good at it. Can you please make a data visualization of all the people Rob's met and their locations?
Wow,
I think that would
cool.
be a sick thing to see how far you have spread your message. So just putting it out into the universe.
Yeah, I love that idea.
That would be so cool. Like a little dashboard, we can get all nerdy with it. We can fill out.
All right, chill, Mr. Consultant. Calm down.
Sorry.
Parker will be the one to do it.
Yeah, right.
Sponsored by Elevation Nation. Boom. No, but I think it's funny, Sam, you asked about how you hold other people accountable, but how are you holding yourself accountable every day to bring your best self to the conversation, but just in life in general? Do you have some like morning rituals that you go through, some habits that you have that you've instilled that have helped you through this?
I don't necessarily think I have morning rituals. My morning ritual is to wake up, take a shower, eat a small breakfast, make coffee, and then come up and sit down to my computer. So it's very simple, but I mentioned earlier I'm a very routine person, and I'm very disciplined within that routine, and I think that's just something that I've come to enjoy. And I really like the idea of accountability. I think there's a lot of people in the world who don't like to take accountability because it's just easier to say, oh, that wasn't me, or like I couldn't do this because of this XYZ, whatever. But when you do take accountability, in a way, it just makes you really confident. And I think people can see that. But for me, I don't have a boss or anyone that's telling me to do this, and I have expectations for my life where I do want to get married, I do want to have a wife and kids, and I do want to have a modest house and a car and be able to go on vacations and things like that. And the only person who's going to be able to create those opportunities in the path that I'm in is me. So if I don't show up and I don't bring my best self to a meeting, then I'm hurting myself. And if I choose to take a day off and because I'm tired, I don't want to meet people, then the progress of my project is stopping. It's not going anywhere. I don't have a teammate who's carrying it forward during that time. So yeah, I think it's just a lot of responsibility, and I think I'm ambitious towards reaching those goals of achieving freedom through my project. And I've taken a big risk. There are times that still to this day and through COVID a lot, I've thought about my path and been like, have I just royally screwed myself for the future? Like, I can't go back to Deloitte now. I mean, I could and spin my story in a way, but I've really removed myself from that traditional path. So there's a lot of pressure on me to make this work, and I think I'm willing to do a lot to make this work. And the good thing is I already live a very simple lifestyle, so it's really only up from here. But yeah, I think the accountability just becomes maybe from the ambition and just a very deep understanding of the fact that I'm in charge of my own success.
Well, I think Parker and I have no doubt that you already are and will continue to succeed with your project and your endeavors. I mean, dude, we met you for an hour each individually. Now we're coming together for another hour, and I feel like we've all known each other since we were kids. So this has been sweet. We have 2 questions that we ask everybody at the end of the podcast. So I'm going to ask the first one. If you could give your about to graduate self a piece of advice, what would it be? We're throwing it back to college.
Yeah, I would say to try. Well, there's one. Okay, I would say try to gain as much exposure to things as quickly as possible through experiences, meeting people, trying different things, because I really think knowledge is power, and the way we gain knowledge is through experience. And for me, I've learned so much through the people that I've talked to, a way that I see the world and society and my own life. And I feel like we can be limited in that and maybe our individual paths. So I think, yeah, just try to be exposed to as much as possible. And me being biased with my project, I would say be intentional about human connection. And I'm talking about this more now, but it increasingly blows my mind that there are people who will go to the gym 3 days a week. They'll read 20 books a year or whatever, but they won't set a goal for themselves to meet one new person a month. And I don't understand why that doesn't exist, because to me, meeting person is a higher value activity than any of the other things we can do, because it leads to future opportunities and increased sense of belonging, better perspective and empathy. There's health benefits to it. So I would tell myself maybe back then, and even like my time at Deloitte may have looked differently if every week or every month I was sitting down trying to talk to a partner to learn from them, to learn their story and whatnot. So yeah, gain that exposure, be intentional about connection.
Love that. That was like, I was sitting there, I was like, Sam, that's an all moment, just listening to what you have to say about that, Rob. I mean, that was super cool, and I couldn't agree with you more. Sometimes it takes a lot of mental fortitude to step back and acknowledge that, just go out and meet some people, meet some new people. So I love that. It's amazing. But Rob, we've been talking about mental fortitude a lot on this podcast. And like I said, Sam and I have been pretty obsessed with the term over the last couple months, I guess more than a year now. We talked about mental fortitude being broken down into self-awareness, vision, and accountability. But that is what Sam and I believe mental fortitude is. We're curious, and I'm sure Elevation Nation is curious too. What does mental fortitude mean to you?
I feel like in what I have experienced in my life so far, I think faith is a really good synonym for it, and not so much in the sense of religion or anything like that, although I think that can be included. But I have had to have a lot of faith in myself with this project. And what I mean by that is continuing to meet people day in and day out where I don't have an answer of how I'm going to make money, or I don't know when the next time I'm going to get a paycheck is. It's just continuing to do the activity with this belief that it will work out at some point in the future. And at some point in the future, I'll gain either the necessary resources or the necessary knowledge to figure it out. And I think like it's just straight up faith. And I think it takes a lot of fortitude to have faith, because when your bank account is dropping every month and people are looking at you like, what are you doing with your life? You were a consultant at Deloitte. You had everything was in place for you, being me, to say, okay, well, I see that that's happening. Logically on paper, that's happening. But I believe that there are things that maybe are not showing up there that are going to show up in the future. And then like a press piece happens and your luck starts to change, or you get laryngitis and you start reaching out for speaking opportunities and they come to you. And then you have companies reaching out to you that you didn't even reach out to. And I think the mental fortitude is being to paint it in a visual way. And I heard this from a wedding photographer who I met. It's like walking through a dark forest with just the light of your iPhone. Like trusting that even though you can only see what's just in front of you, that you're going down the path, and as things come into focus, you'll be able to make the decision as to, okay, this is the good path for me to go down, or I'm going to turn right at this fork. That to me is mental fortitude.
Beautiful. That's why this question's so interesting. You know, Parker and I have our definition, and everybody who comes on the show has a different one. And I think faith and trusting yourself is a beautiful thing that we all can work on and improve. So, Rob, I want to thank you for, one, giving us the time, two, allowing Parker and I to participate in your project, because it was awesome to meet you, and really just three, for helping everybody realize that through making connections with other people, learning diverse experiences, and really stepping outside of our comfort zone, we can help make ourselves and the world a better place. So appreciate what you're doing, brother. This was awesome.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, Rob, I respect the hell out of you and what you're doing with your project. I mean, if we're talking about true entrepreneurship, you define it. Like, you are the true entrepreneur. You're going out, you have this vision. You don't know where that next paycheck may be coming from, but you have faith that it's all going to work out. And just what you're doing with your mission, meeting people around the world. I mean, I'm sure you've had conversations that have kept you up at night because you were just thinking about how that person lives a certain way and that perspective that they bring that you've never thought of. It's a beautiful thing. Sam and I are very, very grateful to have you on the Elevation Nation podcast, so I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. And I think we realized from our meetings with each other how easy it was to click, and we're all of very similar mindsets, both in kind of the way we lived our life after school, going into the Big Four kind of world, and then that sense of having a purpose outside of that as well. So I had a great time chatting with you guys back then, and obviously a great time chatting with you again tonight. I appreciate you bringing me on and giving me a chance to share what I learned. It was fun.
Absolutely, man. We loved it. Elevation Nation, until next week then. Peace. Yo, Rob, that was